How's it going, guys? This is your boy Hazzed, and today we're going to be discussing the speculatory future of Death Knights in general. Now, a few things have came out in the past few weeks that have really gotten the community excited for Death Knights in the future, and I really just wanted to kind of cover them in this video, talk about them, and of course give my opinion to whether or not I think it's going to be good overall for us in the future. Now, the other thing I'd like to talk about is where have I been hiding for the past few weeks, and honestly, I have been just absolutely lost when it comes to playing Classic. I have just been on there on a Fury Warrior, full clear Molten Core, you know, killed Onyxia, the whole 9 yards, ready for that PvP content to come out so I can just smash on some Classic BGs is really what I'm hyped up for when it comes to Classic, and I'm ready for it. But this video, obviously, that is a story, that is a video for it's all on its own. In this video, we're going to be discussing DKs and the future of DKs, and I'm honestly really excited to talk about and cover some of these topics, because if you guys know, I am a huge advocator for two-handed Frost DKs. If I played it for years. If you look at the banner on my YouTube channel, my Death Knight is holding a two-hander, not one-handers. I have not succumbed to the dual-wield Frostness, even though, I mean, I do actually like playing dual-wield, but just not the current variation of it. But let's go ahead and jump into this video and talk about this. So starting out, the thing we need to remember is all of this at this point is just speculation, but there are a few things that are leading to specific hints that definitely give us a little bit at least to talk about. It gives us a little bit of a platform to stand on. Now, starting out, probably the largest discussion both on the forums and on my videos regularly is whether or not they should bring back two-handed Frost DKs. And as you guys know, I want two-handed Frost DKs, as I have montage after montage of playing two-handed Frost DKs back in the day, just to the other point that my fingers bled. I mean, for overall Frost DKs, I'm ranked like 145 overall for Battleground wins in the world for all time, just all-time Death Knights. I absolutely love PvPing, but lately with this new dual-wield Death Knight and what they've done to him, I've barely PvP'd at all in comparison to what I used to do. And of course, with Classic coming around, I hardly touched it at all. Now, what actually has me so excited for the future of Death Knights in general, I'll go ahead and show you guys right now. It has to do with the new Death Knight swords that are coming out. And I don't know if this is a later patch to this expansion or it's going to be the next expansion, which a lot of people are thinking it's going to be the next expansion, and it's going to be the new Ebon Blades. Now I'll go ahead and type that in. Now, if you go on the PTR, you could actually go to your collection screen, go to two-handed swords specifically. Remember, two-handed swords specifically, that's going to play a fairly big role within the discussion, because we're not under one-handed swords, we're under two-handed swords. Now, the two blades that we're talking about are the first two that are kind of here. Now, they're from a quest. Now, what a lot of people seem to think, based on the stats and level of this current blade, these are going to be starter quest items that you're going to be able to pick up on your Frost DK. Hopefully within the next expansion. Now, the first one we're going to be looking at is the Burning Blade of the Ebon Blade. Hold on, why is there blade in there twice? It doesn't sound like this item's done at all, honestly, if you actually look at that. But anyways, so Burning Blade of the Ebon Blade. Now, this is a two-hander. Not really that exciting, but once you actually take into accumulation that there's two other blades that are supposed to be made for this, there's an Unholy Blade and a Blood Blade, a Burning Blade, and a Frost Blade. Now, we kind of accumulate these and put these together, and what does that tell us? That there may actually be 4 Death Knight specs coming within the future of Death Knights. A Frost spec, a Fire spec, a Blood spec, and an Unholy spec based on these 4 weapons you can choose from, because usually when you get these weapons, they're based on your character's specialization. Generally they are with Frost Death Knights, or any Death Knight realistically, in the questing starting zone. So that's really got a lot of people thinking that there's going to be some kind of change to the Death Knight starter zone based on these quest rewards, as obviously you can't pick these up right now if you make a new Death Knight. That might be something we can look into on the future on PTR. Now, the thing that really got people excited about these, obviously the Burning Blade, which kind of hints towards the future of Fire Death Knights being implemented into the game, which realistically would actually be really cool to see Fire Death Knights. Now, where does this also come from? Obviously, it comes from Bolvar. Now, Bolvar is the current Lich King in World of Warcraft. He became the Lich King after Arthas was destroyed, Frostmourne split in half, and then Bolvar decided to be the Keeper of the Damned. Now, what kind of led to this, obviously, was when Bolvar stormed the Ice-Crown Citadel. Bolvar was then fighting, the Lich King and the Lich King's minions. He was then taken down by the Forsaken and the Blight, which causes your flesh to rot away. It would cause your lungs to fill up with just an absolute ton of nasty liquids, and you would just basically suffocate to death is what would happen to you out there. But during this, as Bolvar was losing consciousness right there between that line of life and death, he was hit by the dragon, or red dragonflight's fire, which, if you don't know, when it comes to dragons, fire is kind of like to these dragons life. If you ever seen the dragons, they can dispel corruption with their fire. They can basically do just about anything with their fire, which is crazy because it's magical fire. It's not, match fire burn. It has different properties and different rules based on how it can burn and how it's used. But when it hits Bolvar, not only does it kind of replenish him and get rid of, let's say, the rottingness of his flesh, but it chars him and creates this half undead, half human, somewhere caught between life and death person that can't die but is not necessarily alive and being kept alive by the red dragonflight's fire. He then later just decides he can't be around people and goes for the full Lich King helm and throws that thing on. Now, the one thing we know about that Lich King helm when he puts it on, his eyes are not blue. The emblem in the middle of his forehead is not dark, it's not blue, but red. So at this point, we've got to realize that this is going to be some kind of new classification of Death Knights, and it's really been something I've been waiting to see, and see if he's going to start rezzing Death Knights into his likeness. Because if we've known the first Frost Death Knights to come about were from Arthas, and as we know about Arthas, is he became the first Frost Death Knight because of Frostmourne. Without Frostmourne, they're going to be built in Bolvar's likeness. Kind of like even the first Death Knights in general were created, and those were unholy Death Knights created by powerful necromancers. So as you can see, Death Knight's powers and what they're capable of doing is going to be based on what kind of leader is rezzing them and imbuing this spirit into some kind of warrior's body, some kind of fallen warrior's body. Creating a Death Knight was generally how they're created. Now, I don't know if that's how the Fire Death Knights are going to be created, but I got to imagine some of those rules will apply. So how are we going to get Fire Death Knights? Well, they're going to be rezzed and brought back, obviously, by Bolvar, or some kind of hand of Bolvar's, because they're going to be created in his likeness. Now, the other thing that's got people excited, now that we've kind of covered the Fire Death Knight aspect, which is really something that I've thought to be like just kind of crazy, the idea of Fire Death Knights. I mean, it's not too crazy considering we have seen Frostfire skills in the video game, in the game in general, in the past, which does support the fact that you can have Frost Fire. It is applicable. It is malleable in the game. You could implement it in, not a lot of people are going to stand around going, well, this is kind of odd. How are you going to have Frost and Fire? I mean, it does kind of make sense if you really think about what we've seen in the past. But also getting into the second thing that's absolutely blowing Death Knight's mind in general, now that we've gotten past the burning blade of the Ebon Blade. I hope they don't keep it like that, because that is absolutely insane, is the freezing blade of Ebon Blade. Now, at first look, you're like, why would we be excited about a freezing blade? Well, there's an unholy blade and a blood blade, but this is a two-handed, hold on, two, not one, a two-handed Frost Death Knight sword. Huh? What? What do you mean two-handed? Yeah, you heard me, guys. Right now, this is classified on the PTR as a two-handed, as we can see at the top right there, a two-handed freezing blade. Which obviously I don't think is complete because it says freezing blade of the Ebon Blade. Double blade. Anyways, it is a two-handed frost blade. What could that mean for the future of Frost Death Knights if you are able to take a weapon that's two-handed from a quest which is item specific for your spec, a two-handed frost blade? Now, could we see in the next expansion that Frost DKs could be converting back into using two-handers? Now, this has been an ongoing discussion on the Frost DK forums on my channel. I've personally went around and talked to Frost DKs, and in my opinion, there's about a 20-to-1 opinion on DKs that think two-handed should be brought back, and then compared to people who don't think that Frost DK should have two-handed back, it's about 20-1. Just about in anything I've ever seen, whether it comes to my channel, whether it's on the forums, it's generally the majority wants two-handed back, or they want the option to use a two-hander. And then there's like very few sprinkled in between that are like, no, we like dual wield. And personally, I don't think we should take away dual wield for DKs, because I know there's actually a lot of people that support it. They really like it. They really enjoy it. But at the same time, I want two-hander back. It's the way it is. I want two-handed Frost back. We all do. And this is actually the first hint we've seen in a very long time to playing a two-handed Frost DK again, which it's been very depressing not to be able to use my Shadow Morn on a Frost DK and obliterate people, because like that's literally the reason I went and got that legendary two-hander, was to play Frost with it, and I can't do it anymore, and it's fairly depressing. So just to see the capabilities, or just a little bit of hint in the near future that Frost DKs are going to be able to use two-handers again, has really got me excited. Now there has been a couple of hints to maybe Bolvar being the bad guy, or something along those lines, and personally I don't think that's how it's going to turn up. I think Bolvar is definitely going to be a good guy, and a lot of people could speculate that because of Ner'zhul he's not going to be a good guy. But the one thing to remember at the opening of Icecrown Citadel is the Lich King, when the Forsaken showed up to bomb them, the Lich King said Sylvanas. The Lich King understands that this is not some random Forsaken causing this bombing on them. This is actually Sylvanas' order. He blames Sylvanas for what happens. So that alone tells me, A, he doesn't like Sylvanas, and B, chances are he's going to have a little bit of hatred towards Sylvanas, which as we all know from the recent cinematic, Sylvanas is kind of like the big bad guy. It's going to be the person we got to beat up either near the end of this expansion or within the next expansion. Sylvanas is evil. So that alone tells me that not only the Lich King, based on who Bolvar is going to hate Sylvanas on so many levels just as it is, but Ner'zhul is also going to have a personal grudge against Sylvanas. And there's been ideas that Sylvanas might become the next Lich King, in which I don't think that's actually going to happen, just based on the fact that Ner'zhul actually very much has a distaste for Sylvanas in general. So I really don't see that happening, or that occurring. I mean, it could. It could go any which way at this point. I have no idea. I never thought they were going to take away 200 Frost DKs, but they did that anyways. But, overall, I don't foresee that occurring, which could be kind of cool at the same time, but I really just don't see that happening. But overall, I am completely excited for Frost DKs coming out, especially if they can go back to two-hander. I would absolutely loved it. Like, you could search up my channel videos, two-handed Frost DKs, and just find montage after montage of me completely enjoying the class using a two-hander, just obliterating people. And the only reason I ever spec'd off of two-hander back at the end of WoD was because they completely nerfed the damage of two-hander, and dual-wield Frost was far superior to using a two-hander after the conversion nerf, and then we split over to Death Siphon. Things along those lines is what kind of converted the majority of Death Knights over to dual wielding instead of using a two-hander. Then once Legion came around, we were glass cannons. They took away all of our healing. We were forced to play dual wield. We couldn't use our two-handers anymore, so it became more of a damage over time spec. Now, back in Legion, we didn't have the mechanical abilities that we have now in the current expansion, and that really just nerfed our damage and our overall DPS down even further, because we lost our big burst by losing a two-hander, and then they took away our consistent pressure by adding in mechanically passive abilities that are fairly strong inside of arena situations, but it completely gimped us when it came to 1v1 or battleground brawling, which is what I like to do in the game. And, it completely killed the aspect that I really enjoyed. And with the two-handed Frost DK spec coming back, I believe it has a chance to restore that. Because when it comes to the normalized dual wield versus two-handed rotation, you follow essentially the same rotation. You lay out obliterates, you dock the target, you lay out obliterates until you get frost strikes, and then use the frost strikes. But the big difference between two-handed and frost or two-handed and dual wield is two-handed, you lay out the big obliterates, and then you could use the runic power to actually death strike up while still having the majority of your damage as frost. But when it comes to dual wield, if you're using your runic power on death strikes instead of frost strikes, you're losing the majority of your damage, pumping it into survivability, which was a major downfall for dual wield. build, which is something that it required things like Death Siphon or Conversion to stay alive, which we absolutely got that taken away from us coming into the new expansion, which was really why I dislike dual wield over two-hander, which is, yeah, that's really why I just dislike that in general. But overall, I've got to say this is really cool to see. I like the way this is going. I hope that they continue with this direction. Like, this isn't just a, oops, we accidentally put it under there. We made it have a different sprite than it should be. So I'm hoping this is actually solid in the near future. Now, the other thing that they're doing is they're bringing forward the allied races for Frost Death Knights, or Death Knights in general. Now, this has been something they've been talking about quite a bit, both on the forums and, of course, I believe it was the dev interviews that they were doing on Twitch. They've also talked about this a few times, that they wanted to make the allied races Death Knight appropriate, so we could play these allied races as Death Knights, which personally I've always wanted to be a Zandalari Death Knight. Since converting over to a Death Knight, before that I've always wanted to be a Zandalari Shaman. The first time I seen a Zandalari, I was like a buff troll that does squats and you know, actually has a straight back and he's buff. Like, that is absolutely savage. Like, I've always loved the idea of playing Zandalari for some reason, like just big old buff troll. Yeah, they've decided to start bringing some of the character models into the game, so we'll be able to actually soon enough, hopefully within the next expansion, play some of these allied races on our Death Knights, as I've kind of felt left out within this previous expansion, because everyone's like, oh yeah, new allied races, and I'm standing there like, yeah, I'd love to do that, but I'm a Death Knight, so I'm not included in this fun. So I've just kind of migrated, I guess, over to playing Classic more, as there's not really much content that I really enjoy doing on a regular basis on the current WoW. I mean, it's mainly just grinding up the Azerite neck to get Azerite powers, and then after that it's Mythic plus spamming until you get gear, and then you can dip into some PvP if you want, but Frost Death Knights aren't good at brawling battleground / dueling PvP, so it's not really fun to do. You can kind of see how that would put me in a bad mood to not want to play my Death Knight. But this kind of gives me a little bit of hope for the future, guys. And I hope this video gives you guys a little bit of hope for the future, a little bit of what's going on with Death Knights, what people are speculating, and why. So I'm hoping to see what's going on. I'm hoping to see a little bit more coming out on this. I'm hoping Blizzard's going to be like, Two-Handed Frost is coming back, because you know I would if it did. But, again, leave a like on this video if you enjoyed. Leave a comment down below if you have any questions. You want to keep dual wield. You want Two-Handed Frost DKs to come out. Let me know down in the comments below, as you know. And, of course, until next time, this was your boy Hazzed.